first one I would say is for retailers who have a bunch of locations. We deal with a lot of global companies, and they have thousands of stores worldwide, and it's actually a pretty big deal for them to integrate any type of technology into their operation. Some of the most basic things, like getting a QR code on a poster in a window, is actually a pretty big deal when you have to deal with 2,000 stores. And so there's just a big thing about how do you adopt digital behaviors when actually culturally your organization is in the dark ages. Secondly, you have, and almost on the other side, you have a bunch of brands, and maybe some of you guys represent some of them, who actually get digital. They get the consumer, they get the platforms, they get channels, all of that stuff. But the reality is that most of the connection that they have with the people who buy their products are through third parties. So we do Converse in the UK and globally. They don't have stores apart from like a handful, but they sell the best part of 50 million pairs every year. And so for them the struggle is, how do you benefit from all of the stuff that's happening worldwide, and particularly a lot of the what is his name, Martin? Martin? Yeah, he's European, isn't he? Martin. A lot of the kind of like transaction and a lot of the benefit that brands kind of like benefit from now, they actually have some sort of transaction related to it. There's like e-commerce, people are buying things on their phone, online, 1 million people here mentioned ASOS. So how do you kind of like tap into that if you don't own that relationship? And the final one is actually a bit of a weird one, which is, I think a lot of people here, and myself included, we've kind of like grown up with digital over the last few years. But broadly speaking, globally, and particularly in the UK and the US, the consumer's kind of been in a certain place. Rampant consumerism, where people just go out and they buy loads of stuff. And the reality is the world is very different. Shit literally has got real, and it's going to get a lot worse. And from a kind of like design perspective, particularly if you're talking about retail locations and be they online or be they offline, good design is about fulfilling intent, and I kind of believe that people's intent has fundamentally changed and will fundamentally change, and so I think that's kind of like a challenge for us to kind of work out that actually, that couple out there, actually the guy's probably thinking, how can I have a pretty cheap night? And the girl's probably thinking, I need to recycle something because I can't buy something new, and that's kind of like the reality of a lot of places right now. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you very much. René Batsford from Coffee Mob, what about your insight into some of the challenges and opportunities?
Well, I've worked in retail for, getting on for 20 years now, hard to believe. Worked in technology quite a bit, also managed shops as well on the shop floor. So I think I've got a reasonable idea of operational challenges and how, you can obviously bring technology into businesses to enhance the customer experience. But I think that what I've come back to again and again over time is that the rapid pace of technology, the advance of it, and it's quite scary for particularly the board to take that on board, as it were, because a lot of those won't be the people that are actually using the technology, it will be their customers that are using it. So how do you get that stakeholder buy-in?
That's going to be a question for later.
Okay,
so I
sorry.
don't want you to give us the answer just
But it's a
yet.
big one, particularly
Absolutely.
if you work in technology.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a real, there's been a shift in my mind over the last few years to what's happening with your traditional technology, CIO roles within businesses as well, where a lot of these solutions and services are getting kind of commoditized, they're in the cloud or whatever. What for the traditional CIO? I think that they need to kind of embrace really more customer-facing solutions or die. I think that role is going to have to evolve. So you can have people that sit on that kind of edge between the operational, how do you make the thing function day in, day out and work, and the marketing element as well, almost the glue that binds the two together. You've seen it with people like Starbucks as well, organisations like Starbucks taking on a chief digital officer, I think John Lewis as well. So I think that's happening more and more and more. So I think that whole stakeholder landscape piece is can be very challenging, particularly as well. So yeah, brand alignment. So does it fit the brand as well? And I think, you know, particularly even people like myself with technology can get so carried away with it. But you know, does it really fit what we're trying to achieve? So you know, there's loads of things that I was kind of noting down today.
Yeah.
You know, your keywords about engage, resonate, enrich, relevance, complement, simplify. There's about 20 words there, but they, you know, I'm still got to go away and kind of think about those. But I think that's you've got to kind of start again the whole Steve Jobs thing. You've got to start with the customer and work your way back to a solution.
Exactly.
It's no good thing. We've got this great bit of technology. How can we use it?
Perfect.
So,
Thank
and then
you.
the last one, the third one.
More than
is
3 minutes.
sorry, was that okay? So the last one was how do you integrate all this together as well? Because it's so fluid and so dynamic. There's new technologies being thrown at you left, right, and centre. Which ones do you pick that are going to, you know, that you're going to invest in now that are going to be there in the future? Because businesses don't want to buy into something and then junk it next year. They want to be able to sweat the asset, as they call it. So
Can't bear
I
that
think they're the
phrase,
three
but yeah,
challenges.
I'll let it pass. David Law from Someone, can you tell me about some of the challenges and opportunities this area has thrown up for you and the work you do with some of the brands you've worked with and working with?
You know, we're a brand identity agency. We work with big and small brands. We don't have any specialism. We've got global brands. We've got tiny SMEs as well on our list. I think I can only echo some of the points here. Is that the one thing we tell all our clients is to think like a customer. It's the one thing they always forget. And I think some of the clients get it and don't get it in terms of digital and technology. I have a large global client who, for them, the hardest thing for them is to manage internal change. They've got, the average life of a marketing director is about 18 months. You've got that amount of time to change the brand. Now, if that guy is looking over his shoulder at his own job, it's going to be very hard for him to push a technological step change up to the board. And that is the biggest hurdle we face. I think there's got to be a root and branch change within those organisations. Now, there are other organisations that take it and run with it, and that's fantastic. But I think that's the biggest challenge we face is actually managing that internally.
Scott Morrison from Diesel, how long have you been marketing director at Diesel?
Am I on? Can you hear me? 4.5 years at Diesel, so average. Longer than my average, slightly above average. I mean, clearly, you know, I can say what everyone else has said because all of those challenges are very, very real. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. The reality is that one of the biggest challenges that we faced was I'm going to talk about 2 challenges, 1.5 minutes for each challenge. But one of the biggest challenges that we face is that I've seen everything today, and I've been to a lot of these different things where I hear words like disruption and noise and chaos theory and fragmented and everything else. And the danger with all of this stuff is that whilst some of it is really happening out there, is that people tend to lose a sense of vision and a sense of clarity and a sense of simplicity. And what I mean by that is, I mean, my background was in ad agencies before I moved into client side. And I spent a lot of time at Saatchi & Saatchi. And however brilliant advertising is and has been over the last 150 years, and even now when you can do some fantastic things, the one thing that we came back to every single time on an advertising campaign was a single-minded proposition. What is the one thing you are trying to achieve or do with this advertising? It doesn't matter whether you spend millions on a TV campaign or hundreds of thousands on a digital campaign. If you're not rooted in something that's really, really strong and powerful, and in this case, from the client side, it's usually something to do with the consumer, then we can all be very distracted by, this would look amazing in my store, this Facebook app, or I could do this wicked changing room in my store, or I can go and do this with my business. And the reality is, when it comes back to sitting in front of the board and saying, this is what we want to do, this is why we want to do it, if people aren't clear on the measurements that they're putting in, the KPIs or the ROI, whatever measures you prefer to look at, because they've been distracted by beautiful shiny things over in different areas, then the technology traction never really adds any value back to the business, because retail is a very traditional setup currently, which everyone said today, and it's much easier to go back to what you know and put a window in or add extra product onto the shop floor than it is to embrace technology that's based on a consumer insight. So that's our first issue, is making sure simplicity and the customer is the heart of everything. Second thing is that I'm in an organisation that's run out of Italy. Now, Italy is a wonderful place for so many things, including fashion. The flip side of that is that the uptake of technology and the digital, the village where we come from in Diesel has only just got broadband. So that can give you an indication of the challenges that we face when our owner has a huge mission to get 5 million Facebook fans. And the reality of technology and business in the UK is that that's kind of a byproduct of doing some really fantastic marketing that will drive your business forward. But marrying those two thoughts and those two positions can be quite tricky to get your head around. So
Great.
the two very real challenges, from my experience, is that the offline experience, for want of a better, what happens in store is it can be a beautifully crafted and important part of the seamlessness. And what happens is the online business goes, hang on, we need to cram all this stuff in because your customers aren't getting what they need. And actually, people don't actually recognise the beauty of a store staff member coming up and talking you through the product face to face, and a store staff member handing you 3 things in the fitting room and making recommendations. They think it has to be done through Facebook, or it has to be done through some other digital technology, which can be quite threatening, because if you don't recognise the power that each medium has, then you don't have a vision. You just think it's all digital plugged into stores. Everyone can be a robot. The customer wants to serve themselves, and therefore you lose any element of seamlessness. And it starts with the consumer, and then what the merits are of each of the different retail media that you operate in, and then that's how you find your balance.
It's results, really. At the end of the day, people, we talked about being people business, but we're in a selling business. And if you take the company in a different direction through whatever means, and you have the results that mean that you have either more people who are seeing your messages, you're selling more stuff, you've got more distribution points, you can put a value on it. I mean, if you're talking about the C-suite, then that's essentially that's the language, that's the currency.
But before you've got to the point where you can even show any results, how do you make that first step to be able to embark on this
Show
stuff
other
if you're not in the C-suite yourself?
Show other people's results. Seriously.
Prove. I mean, when I joined EAT, I was there for 5 years. I had a real challenge at the beginning, trying to convince them that free Wi-Fi, because they wanted to commoditise it. So FD is like, it's another stream, for us. So we can make money out of that. So I did use the McDonald's one there actually to say, no, this is changing. It's not about, I think Starbucks were using T-Mobile and they were charging you. And we were one of the first to kind of break rank in our particular sector. And then, as we started to roll the technology out, we were getting feedback from customers to say, well, I'm not coming in your store, I'm going to Nero's because they've got it. So that's quite a powerful argument. So there are things you can use. But I think there's obviously, particularly for someone who comes from a technology background, it takes a while to kind of pick up on the politics as well. There's lots of businesses that don't have technology as a driver at the board level. My background's always been, I've reported into the financial director, and the FD is one who's quite rightly, job is to contain, monitor, maintain costs, control. And which sometimes that does stifle opportunity. That is a big challenge for a lot of organisations, particularly small to medium organisations, because you can't step out from underneath that. But yeah, I think, I was at a retail week, and there was a lady, I think she works for a headhunting agency, and she did a whole talk about the political landscape. And it really is about getting to know who the key stakeholders are, understanding what their agendas are, personal, and
mapping it onto that.
Really, and focusing on that, and helping them build their careers up as well. And if you can do that, you can win some allies along the way. So there's a lot of politics that goes on around it. You might have the best idea in the world, but it only takes one of those to poo-poo it at the board, and you're not going to get any...
So we're talking shock tactics, we're talking schmoozing. What else are we talking?
I think you've just... There's two things. Obviously, one of them is results. But I always say to my team, there's two things that people can't argue with from a data point of view, like physical results and then what your consumer's telling you. So if you, and to marry to that, you've got to have vision and balls, frankly, because there are too many, I think there are too many people who I speak to who kind of get this stuff and kind of believe in it. And I wouldn't say I'm the most techno-savvy person in the world, but I know what's happening. I know my consumer. I've got a fantastic team, some of them in here today, who are doing all of this stuff. And I've said to them, I'm happy to go to the board with the vision and the balls to say, this is happening. You need to provide me the consumer data. We need to start testing it, and we need to start getting results. But I think if you go in a bit half-hearted, or you go in with gimmicky stuff and say, yeah, you know, this Facebook thing might really work well for us, and you don't have a sense of bringing everything together to drive the business forward and have a 2, 3, 5 year plan, and I think you're on hiding to nothing.
Can I ask you a bit more? We might as well dive into the ROI question. I mean, you mentioned your CEO and his ambition to have...
On the site, the biggest change was that to show an independent feeling is that instead of showing you a big map of Britain with millions of red dots showing you where all these independent coffee shops are, so where would you like a better coffee? Type in your postcode and it will offer you up other brands on your site. Now for Tesco's, their jaw hit the floor. You're suggesting we advertise competition on these websites. So things like that is giving more than you take. Excellent.
And finally, Michael.
I would say behave today the way you want to behave tomorrow.
What we're doing is it's about creating employment for young people. So we're working with the Prince's Trust to help disadvantaged young people. We will train them up to be top baristas. We'll obviously have a very good product. We'll have very good coffee machines, good beans. You've got to have a good product. So there's no point doing all this wonderful stuff unless the product's really good.